Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, Ampire. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see the guest over here, Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. We're going to dive into the Commanders' 37-20 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of topics came out of this one, and we're going to dive into that in a minute. Don't forget, on Tuesday night, Bram Weinstein and I will do our live stream show on YouTube, 7:30 Eastern time on Tuesday. And again, there's a lot to discuss because the playoff race is still on. They got 2 games, they win them both, and they're in the playoffs. So a lot to discuss. The quarterback situation we're going to discuss. Nicki, we're going to start with that one because nothing else. I mean, that's the biggest thing to come out of this game, correct?
Yes.
Aside from the loss. Absolutely. I mean, the loss was bad, but
Right. I mean, their playoff hopes aren't eliminated or anything, right. But yeah, I mean, and I think, a lot of us thought this was a very real possibility going in, that if, they struggled, then there could be a shift. I thought what was interesting is Taylor Heinicke actually had a pretty good first half. They committed to the run, but he was overall pretty efficient. It just kind of came unglued there on consecutive drives in the fourth where, he was hit by Nick Bosa, fumbled, or it was intercepted rather. It kind of fell into the arms of Jordan Willis. And then there was the fumble. So they decided to go to Carson Wentz, which, it kind of seems like that will be the decision going forward. But Ron Rivera didn't want to make any, promises then. He said they'll review the tape and discuss it as a staff and decide early next week. And it's kind of one of those things where he says, we want to make it early and don't have the next quarterback looking over his shoulder. But at the same time, as we've seen with this team, it is very much a kind of week to week thing.
And I'll be honest, I thought this is how it was going to go, that Carson was going to play today, not because I thought Taylor didn't have this horrible game, but just the way that Niners team is, they're very good. And you knew that this team would be in a position where they needed to make a change for, whether it's Heinicke's fault or not, that was going to happen. So were you surprised at all that that they ended up playing?
No, not at all. I mean, once they had those two turnovers and they were right around the red zone area, I thought, that's got to be it because, they had the 2 red zone turnovers last game and that kind of put them in this precarious spot. And, while the turnovers weren't solely on him, that late pick was pretty bad. It's just game circumstances. They wanted to see what they had in Carson. And, while Ron says, the offense is different, while he was in anyway, with Carson, it wasn't all that different. It was him throwing quick passes and you could see his arm strength and he looked good and ultimately led him on a touchdown drive in his first one back. So.
Right. And, the hard part for Heinicke, and the problem that I have with all of this is that, Heinicke gets hit because they're getting pinched and the line's not holding up.
Right.
And, in a lot of situations early in the game, they were using a tight end to chip on Bosa. They used that a lot. But in some situations, they weren't able to do that, or they didn't do that for whatever reason. And that's where this team has to get better, whoever's a quarterback, until they get that fixed. And you can see sometimes that pocket just is very tight and you don't have room to maneuver. And, that's to me the biggest problem. Now, as far as Wentz goes, actually, I liked what I saw from him. And I certainly expect him. I certainly expect that he's going to be the guy going forward. Yeah. Do you expect that?
Yes. Oh, fully. I mean, there's, after what he showed in his 2 drives, really 2, right? Yeah. In those 2 drives that there was really no to turn back. I mean, we didn't get a full glimpse of what he'd look like if they continue to stick to the run, because by then they were passing much of the time. And he too faced pressure. I mean, on that, a 2-point conversion attempt, the pocket collapsed on him. So, but he was able to get the ball out quicker. You could see, the zip on the throws, it was much better. And he quickly let him upfield on that touchdown drive. So yeah, I think they want to see what they have in him, but I also think, this is right now it's what they need. We'll see what the rest of the team, how they feel about it, because they really did rally behind Taylor Heinicke.
Do you think that's still at this point, and again, there are other issues on that offense, but they know they're not producing because they're not getting more than 20 points is not going to win you enough games.
Right.
And so do you think, like, I think several weeks ago, there may have been an issue. You've now
Yeah.
gone 0-2-1 in your last three. Do
I
you
think
think
they
there,
just want to win and get in the playoffs, whoever is leading
right.
them.
I also think too, and I'm going to get to Carson's game in a minute because I had a couple of things that I jotted down. But when you look at the relationship between Carson and Taylor, how much do you think that will help in the locker room?
Oh, tremendously. I thought that was really telling, especially, given Carson Wentz's reported history and things that were said about him. You go back to Philly when he was benched in favor of Jalen Hurts. The rapport these two have, you can see it. I mean, Carson Wentz goes out and scores a touchdown. Taylor Heinicke's the first one congratulating him. When Taylor's asked about it in his post-game presser, asked about his own performance, he immediately brings up Carson and says he thought Carson did a really good job, which, it says a lot about their relationship, kind of how both have handled a very strange season, maybe not strange for Washington, but strange for those two individually. And I think that can only help them. They're both professional about it. And, Heinicke's, unfortunately for him, been in this situation before, and knows how to handle it. And Carson seems to be taking this one in stride. So, I think that's great for the locker room. Now they just need to win these last two games.
Yeah, because I've been in that locker room when you have quarterbacks in recent years where they don't get along, and everybody knows it. And so then, I like when Robert and Kirk were here, they didn't get along. I don't think the locker room was necessarily divided after a while because I think they felt like one was better than the other. But there was tension there, and that doesn't. I don't think that. And sometimes there's understandable tension because, as Carson said after the game, everybody wants to play. Yep. But I do give them credit for how because Carson brought him up as well. And he talked about, like, somebody asked him in the presser, and obviously, as people can tell, I wasn't at the game, so I'm back in Virginia. But at the presser, somebody brought it up, and he immediately talked about how Taylor he had this awesome throw, he had this one, he brought up some very specific things.
He said, listen, I feel bad for Taylor too. Like, he knows what it's like to be in that situation. He has the injury and essentially gets Wally pipped, and and Taylor takes over for the rest of the way. So they both understand the situation. They've been in it before. And so they both know how the other side feels, which, is not always necessary, but I think important in this situation. Because they both know how to prepare as a backup. They both know they're one play away as a starter, and they can understand how the other feels. It creates for more of a seamless transition, as seamless as you can have, really, in these circumstances, as they make a switch, another switch.
Yeah, and absolutely. And again, like in the locker room, for example, their lockers are essentially next to each other. There's one empty one in between, although there's a bunch of stuff in there, but they sit next to each other there, and they do seem to have a good relationship. And again, it matters because I think in this situation, it helps any transition. But I also, listen, these guys know what kind of arm Carson has, and you can see it. And there were times in that game where as soon as he came in, the Niners were blitzing because and they did, and that way you should do it. But he had a couple throws that I think out of that were just maybe an indication, because one thing you kept hearing is, and Ron Rivera would talk about this, that he has, he's grown in this offense. He's done this. Well, we don't know because we haven't seen it, and they know where he's at, but we don't. And so, and I don't even know that they knew where he was truly at, because you can't until you're on the field. You can have all this knowledge, but you're on the field, making quick decisions. But there come times the blitz is coming and he's getting it out to the right guy in a hurry, and like you had one where there's pressure and getting out to Antonio Gibson and it just, for a positive gain. And there was an overload on that side. So there was it was a 5-man rush against 5-man protection, but the overload was to a side. So the quarterback has to pick up, like, his job is there's 3 versus 2. Your job is you're picking up this guy by getting rid of the ball quick. And he did. So there were things like that. And the touchdown pass to Samuel was just a really nice throw. So you saw those things that I think they hope to see. The question I have, Nicki, too, is do you think they'll maintain? Because again, they've all talked, the identity has changed since he was in last time. If he goes in there, do you think they'll stick to that identity?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, what we saw from him was great. It was, up tempo 2 minute basically, and he looked great. What will he respond as well when he has more time to throw? And will he take too much time? And, what if the receivers aren't open? Will the pockets just collapse around him, much like it did in the first 5 games? Can he keep it up this efficiently going forward? To me, it's the glimpse we saw of him today really isn't a fair glimpse of what he could be in the offense, because it was just different circumstances. They were playing catch up.
Right. And I think that ball control part of it too, because that to me is will they adhere to that ball, that run heavy mentality with the guy that can throw it around a lot differently.
Exactly.
And then early in the year, the answer was no. Now, Brian Robinson wasn't there at that point, or in the first few games at least, and he's much better now. So that's the thing is, do you believe Scott Turner will adhere to that? Or if he doesn't, will Ron Rivera be on his neck?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, Carson Wentz really only had 2 games with Brian Robinson. He came back for his first game in week 5, and then, and that was it. So they really don't have much time together. They certainly don't have the time to, really commit to a run first offense. And when you trade for a guy like Carson Wentz, you don't really do so with, the thinking that it is going to be run first, no matter what Ron Rivera has said with his 2-back tandem and envisioning that. This is a guy that can throw the ball. He can sling it. So yeah, I think it'll be very interesting these next 2 weeks to see kind of what shift the offense takes. Will they stay with that run first identity, or will they shift more toward what Carson does best? That's throwing the ball.
And I will say these next 2 opponents, Cleveland and Dallas, are struggling against the run. So if they don't adhere to that, then that's a problem. And if it costs them the playoff game, then there's got to be a lot of heavy self-evaluation after the season if they don't do that. So because it's there. The Browns don't stop the run, and Dallas is struggling against it too. So they have no choice. And that's where I go to too with the quarterback, and why you don't put it on Heineke, and is that, again, you need better play from that line. And in terms of pass protection and better pockets to be formed, and sometimes a little bit more time and just holding up better and not getting pinched and all that. So sometimes you're not giving up a sack, but you're just not having a good pocket. So that's an off-season thing. So, that we'll see where that goes. The other thing, Nicki, that comes out of this is, and we're seeing it the last couple of weeks, is, my goodness, Johan Dotson is back. And that kid is just, I know he dropped that one, but did you guys talk to him? Did he say what happened on that one?
No. And I still give him credit because he made that adjustment similar to the adjustment he made in the Giants game. And it just kind of bounced off of him. But had he not kind of made an adjustment to get back, that never would have even come that close. It could have been picked off for all it was worth. So,
but he's special. He's going to be special.
He really is. And he's turning into a heck of a player. And, for all the doubts I had about him as their first round pick, I retract all of that. He's really good.
I really liked watching him at Penn State. And then when I went back and watched after the draft, or just a little bit leading up to it, but more so after, because I didn't think they were going to be in that position to get him. But I really liked more what I saw, but I also love watching him. And even some of the routes, the touchdown route he had last week against the Giants, and just the subtlety of his moves at full speed is really good. And even on the touchdown, he sells the guy, the safety thinks he's coming inside, and he sells it. The guy opens up to the inside, and then boom, he's outside. And I know that necessarily wasn't his guy. It's just that he created more space for himself. And I think he just fooled the defense because they thought he was breaking in. So, but he sells routes very well. And
he has incredible body control, especially right before the catch. I mean, there was that one catch that was bobbled, and he ended up catching it somehow. And I just don't think any receiver can just catch those things. He just has total control.
What about him too? Because we had to deal with him now all year. What's your take on him just dealing with him?
On, just in terms of media, I think to me, he always comes off as a little shy, but also just totally disinterested in media. But he's always been cordial to us. He'll talk to us, and I've enjoyed the conversations I've had with him.
Yeah, no, he comes across as very mature.
Yeah, very much so. He's kind of quiet, but he understands. It doesn't feel like you're talking to a rookie. He doesn't seem like things are too big for him. He just kind of goes along with the day to day, never seems too overwhelmed, never is pretty even, really. So yeah, I really think they got a gem in him.
But it's funny too, because obviously Carson has connected with him pretty well. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I'll be curious to see, if assuming they stick with Carson, is how does that change the dynamic of who's getting the ball? Because obviously McLaurin, you need to get him the ball. Right. But Dotson gets it too. So what do you think, how much do you think that will be a big issue, or an issue at all?
I think if there's an issue, it's less about Dotson and more about Terry, because Carson and Terry kind of had their struggles, just, limited time in the offseason together. So I'm curious to see how that works out. And it was magnified by the rapport that Taylor had with Terry. Especially today, hit him on that 51-yard play and then hit him with a touchdown. So, yeah, I'm curious to see if they have a stronger rapport just with more reps in practice, although it hasn't been a ton since, Carson was only recently named the backup, and you don't get a ton of reps even as a number 2. But, yeah, that would be the one that I would look for, because, it's gotten to the point where now Taylor has a pretty, good chemistry with Johan as well. It was always just kind of the Terry part. So,
and I know, like, even today, Terry was getting double teamed a lot. They were using a lot of safety, so that was natural to go to some others at times, and because of that Terry gets a lot of attention, drew a couple of holding penalties. So like he impacts it just with his presence, and they took advantage. Well, I'd say they took advantage. They only scored 20 points, but it just real quick. I want to get to Chase Young, but real quick on the game. Anything jump out of you? The fourth down calls at the goal line? Because I know people are talking about those. Yeah. My big issue coming out of this one, because going forward, it's all about the quarterback now. And so, and then Chase Young being back, blah, blah. But what did you think about those calls?
Yeah, I mean, the first 4th and 1 at the 1, they got to convert that. I mean, this is going back to, season long of red zone issues. You have to convert that. I think you could argue either way that, they had Brian Robinson on the first 3 carries of that series. I still thought they should have stuck with him. No disrespect to Antonio Gibson, but I thought, he's a more powerful runner. He'll get, if only inches, he has a chance to drag a couple defenders in with him because he's just that much stronger. But Gibson, they just got to find a way to convert there. Brian had, a couple runs for no gain there too. So it wasn't, I don't mean to put it completely on AG or anything. But then on the other 4th and 1, I mean, again, you just got to convert if you're going to go for it. It came up on inches. I still can't believe that in 2022, we're measuring this stuff with sticks and chains when everything else is digital. It's ridiculous. So I know that did not make Ron happy or, ease his issues with the referees after the last game, but they just got to convert these plays, and there are too many issues where they just beat themselves. These penalties, 3 on special teams, 3 on the offensive line in the first half alone. I mean, it set them back, behind the sticks. You can't do that. Taylor even said that. So that
not against that defense.
Hurt them. And the run game, credit to them. They stuck to it. It just wasn't paying off, especially against this defense. They're just too good.
And I thought the key for the run game was you have to be patient against them, because they just don't give up a lot. Right. So if you're getting, like, they at one point it was like 22.0 per carry, but 22 carries. So I give them credit for sticking with it. With the goal line situation, I would like to have seen Robinson stay in there. And I know part of it is you're putting in Gibson to give that whatever look. Right. But I'm also maybe going to sell if you want to go, you could go play action off that as well. Right. If you wanted to do that. But it almost felt too like, well, hey, the thinking seemed to be like, we didn't run it enough last week inside the red zone, so let's run it every time. So but you get to the one, and like you said, you got to punch it in. But I would have thought a little bit about play action there, maybe, because when you don't work, you wonder what else you could have done. But I agree with you. Like, I would like to have seen Robinson stay in there,
Yeah.
just for that reason. The sneak, that was a massive roll of the dice, and the defense kind of held up and only gave up a field goal. I think that was, I'm not sure that I would have done that one just because of where you were at and the situation in the game. But, it felt like they seemed like they had momentum. I don't like sneaking with the quarterback, and it was only a few inches, but I don't like sneaking with small quarterbacks in that kind of situation. But, I think, again, the biggest thing coming out of here is the quarterback, and then Chase Young's return. This will be the last thing, but Chase Young, what did you think of what you saw from him? And by the way, 30 snaps, which is double what we thought might be.
Which I kind of thought it might happen, and he did too. He alluded to this, when talking to us, and if he felt good, he would kind of wave off the signal to come out and stay in. But I think just getting this first game was huge for him, just to kind of get that monkey off his back, and he did look good. Not a sack or anything like that, but he had that batted pass at the line. He had a tackle on McCaffrey, which appeared to be from the backside. He said it wasn't, but and then he snuffed out that screen on that 2nd and 5, I think, at the end of the third quarter. So he played well. He played smart. He got close on a couple rushes. So I think it's a really good foundation that was laid going forward for him. And I think the fact that he was able to stay in for 30 snaps on his first time out, I mean, all these guys are in shape relative to the, average human being, but to be in football shape when you've missed 22 games, it's going to take a good bit to really get it, up to full form. So the fact that he was able to stay in that long and didn't, appear to lose too much, I thought that was a really, really good sign.
Yeah. And I think it was a reminder of the talent he has, because his presence was felt when he was in the game. Yeah. And they noticed when he was in the game. And there were a couple of times, like, he had one pressure. I think it was actually a completion, may have been, I think it was definitely a completion, but he squeezed through Trent, he had some help from the guard, but he was putting pressure on Purdy. And it's like, that was a good rush. And I agree with you on the screen. I felt like the Niners were trying to take advantage of maybe being over aggressive, but he played it smart. And so I think that's good, but the batted pass, but I just felt like he started to make his presence felt. The first couple of snaps, I thought he looked tentative. And I didn't think he was, you're right. The McCaffrey was from the backside. There were a couple of plays that on the first time went away from him. I didn't think he was looking to get in the play as much. But the more he was out there, the more he was doing that. You could see it, like I think even McCaffrey, when the first time he gets that, it's like, oh, this is what I do. And I think that was a good thing. But that to me was a really good sign going forward. He again, no sacks, but like, my goodness, like, for his first time out in 13 months, that was pretty damn good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it bodes well for him going forward. He seemed really eager after the game, like really fired up. He said he wanted to stay in longer, and immediately kind of turned to the Browns. Come on, Cleveland Browns, let's go. So I think it's a good sign for him and the line.
So what do you think? Got 2 left here. What do you think going forward? I mean, coming out of this game, did this game change anything for you?
I think Derek Forrest kind of said this too, is, with another loss, it kind of feels like another ding, another hit. And it just makes it seem a little bit harder to picture a full playoff push. It's certainly doable. Beating the Cowboys will be difficult in the final game, more so than the other one, I think. But
depending if they have to rest starters or not.
Yeah. But it's doable. They just got to eke out these wins. They got to go back to the basics. I mean, a lot of the things that are holding them back now are the same things that held them back earlier in the season.
Penalties, turnovers.
Penalties, third downs, turnovers, not converting in the red zone. I mean, it's, a lot of the same things, and they just got to get it done.
And that's why the quarterback change will be, assuming that that's where it goes, but it goes back to a lot of that stuff. Not that it's all on Heineke, but the offense needs to produce more, without a doubt. And again, there's more to be fixed after the season. There's nothing that can be done there, but you can make a change there and maybe get something out of it. And I think that's why they're probably going to end up doing that. But yeah, so we'll see. 2 games left. Playoffs still a possibility. They were helped because Detroit and Seattle lost, so they still control their destiny. And again, the last game, if Dallas is resting their starters and they end up losing that game, then there should be some
He's
pretty
probably
angry
deserved to
folks.
lose it.
Yeah, no, that you can't have that happen. You just can't. So
Yeah.
Nicki, I appreciate you joining me. Crazy
course.
time out there for you guys. So everybody have a Merry Christmas. Thanks for tuning in. And again, Nicki, I appreciate you coming in. Tell people where they can find you at Nicki. Well, I'll tell them at Nicki Jhabvala, Jhabvala. There you go. And read her in the Washington Post. She does a great job. Again, Bram Weinstein night, Tuesday night, live stream, 7:30. I will talk to you next time.